Pursuant to Governor Healy's March 29, 2023 bill extending several COVID-era policies and programs by allowing virtual meetings to continue from March 31, 2023 to March 31st, 2025, this meeting of the Norton Conservation Commission will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found at the end of this agenda. Members of the public attending this public hearing/meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearing designated for public comment by raising their hand. And virtually or no in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted. But every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Norton Cable website, www.nortonmediacenter.org, an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting.
Thank you, Dan. Participating tonight are various members, including myself, Julian Cady, Chair. Vice Chair Lisa Carosa is not able, not able to attend tonight. We have also Dan Pearson, Mark Fernandez, Tama Best, Paxton Halsall. Did I get that right, Paxton? Halsall?
As good as it needs to be.
All right. And then we also have our director, John Thomas, our assistant, Megan Harop, and a new member. I believe, Joe, you're a full-fledged member, signed in and sworn in and all of that. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So Joe Carvalho, welcome, and join the fray. Our first item of business is not technically a hearing. It concerns the American Chestnut Foundation and the desire for at least several members, and probably the whole commission, to embrace that by having some chestnuts, American chestnut trees planted here. Now, there was a narrative that was, I believe it was circulated. It may not have been, but there was also a slide presentation presented or available on the Google Drive. So I don't know if everyone has had a chance to review that, but I can summarize briefly if they haven't had a chance to review it. What's the preference? No preference? Or should I just read what Dominic? I should mention that the volunteer who's willing to plant these on various designated conservation areas is Dominic Cruchet. He lives in North Attleboro. He's planted several stands of the American chestnut in various towns, including North Attleboro and Easton. And just to summarize, he's going to plant 4 or 5. Was that a question, anyone? Okay, 4 or 5 plants, and the initial site will be Edith Reed, and they will be marked as American chestnut hybrids. They will be protected with small cages against rabbit and deer damage until they become large enough to be resistant to that. there was a question about the possibility of these plants introducing blight, but it turns out the blight that kills the American chestnut, which was actually introduced from China in the 1880s, it attacks a lot of trees, a lot of species of trees, but the only one it kills is the American chestnut. So it's the blight is pretty much present everywhere. It's endemic here now, and the American chestnut does not become subject to the blight until it gets old enough for the bark to change from smooth to cracked, and it's at that time that the blight can take hold and ultimately kill the plant, but it does not. It kill the tree, but it does not kill the roots. So there are continued shoots that are put up for a long time. And the intent is that over time there will be resistance that will develop, and the American chestnut, which is noticeably different both in genome and in the chestnuts themselves, will again be able to thrive in American forests. And that slide presentation is much more comprehensive and very helpful for additional information. So, do we have any questions about the overall program by the American Chestnut Foundation and just planting a few locally?
No,
I do.
oh, go ahead.
I still have a few questions here on
Okay.
this.
Yeah.
And I just want to be clear on this. I'm fully in support of this, but I do have a couple issues. I want to
Sure.
make sure that these species are not planted within our landscape or any landscape where landscape can be. I know the plants are not accepted under the National Audubon Society as a landscape type plant or open planting in this forestry plant. And I personally would like to see it planted in a tree fall gap or a lake gap within the forest, as so that we would not have to ever worry about it once it does become diseased and worry about takedown and other issues. And being a reforesting species, I feel it would be best placed within our forest and not within an area landscape. Because as they take injury, I am aware that this is also a main reason for where disease can enter.
Well, please clarify for me the difference between a landscape application and forestry, because I was under the impression it would not, if I'm correct in my thinking about landscape, that it would not ever be used for as a landscape tree.
Correct. I'm just concerned that it being planted, if it's planted within the landscape and not within the forest, being in a light gap or tree fall gap in the forestry situation, that we will have maintenance as it does become disease and create suckering. Very common. I can easily point out 4 or 5 situations where we have American chestnut in town that are in a suckering rate.
All right, but where would we give me an example of a landscape spot?
It would be, I believe it'd be more easier to describe the forest. Within the forest where a tree fell, so had a competitive situation where it could outcompete similar size species.
Yeah. So, John, you, I mean, we walked several areas, and I'm assuming none of those would be defined as a landscape application. Is that your sense as well?
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, in an area which is fringes upon a field and a forest, is that considered forest or is that considered landscape? I guess that's kind of what I would want to know, what the definition of the two is, because my understanding is that the area that the individuals looking to plant these trees are adjacent to other trees in the vicinity of fringe forest. So I guess my question is, what is the definition of landscape versus forest? If we were going to go into the middle of the woods and plant, I guess that's forest. So then anything else is considered landscape. Is that my bearing of what I would gather from that?
My concern is just if it's on the edges that it's going to create a maintenance nightmare. Providing, if it's in the edges where there'll be mowing or anything like that, we know that these species are going to become diseased. It's well known that they're going to become diseased at usually we see it around 15 feet of height.
So these areas would be in an area which obviously would be mowed around. I think that was kind of the suggested area because of the easy access to the area and also the availability to kind of maintain these within cages to start. So I guess my biggest thing is, in the event that they are becoming problematic, obviously, if you plant them now, it's going to take years for them to establish themselves. And if they become a nuisance, we could easily have them either cut down or taken down, because I think the area that's being selected is an area where we could easily get a machine and fell these trees if they become a nuisance. So for us to be able to maintain them, I think 5 trees is it's not going to be that much of a maintenance nightmare. But moving forward, if we were to plant, more than 5, maybe 15 or 20, then I could see the potential hazard and issue. Obviously, there's a chance these trees might not take. There's a chance they would. It'd be, it's an interesting kind of concept. I'm willing to, pursue this and see how it works. And if it doesn't work, then we can take it under consideration and have, highway or a company come in and take the trees down if they become a hazard.
And just to add to that, none of the areas that we considered are in high traffic areas. I mean, it's not like there's high human visit or traffic in those direct areas. So I don't think it's a potential hazard in excess of any other tree that can sustain weather damage or disease damage of any kind. So I think that's not going to be a big issue.
Do we, sorry to interrupt, but do we have any kind of like a written contract with this organization doing this work so that we have that kind of clear delineation about what's our responsibility and what's theirs, or?
No, this is a totally volunteer organization. It was started in, I believe it's 1983, and they have volunteer projects across the entire eastern United States. Ironically, our prior director, Jen, was inquired at the same time of the American Chestnut Foundation and was referred to Dominic. So so there's a fair amount of interest in conservation commissions in doing this.
Yeah, I'm fully supportive of it. I was just curious to Joe's point.
Yeah, but one of the things that that Dominic pointed out is if you walk in the landscape, you will find American chestnuts that have reached the sufficient age to actually begin to blossom. So there are those that are reasonably resistant to reach that stage, and depending on how much sunlight they get. So this is not necessarily going to be universally resulting in trees that just die after a period of time. And that's the whole point of the project, is to find those that can resist the blight and preferentially select those. So, Joe, are you okay with that?
I am, like I say, my personal belief is they belong in the forest and not.
Well, I think we're in agreement there, that, you know, we're not gonna select an area, uh, where people frequent it a lot and there's a lot of maintenance associated with the ground. So I think we're not in disagreement at all.
And to add to that, I wouldn't be against creating more forest area at Edith Reed either. So less maintenance and upkeep of the fields.
All right, so, further questions, I think we can, you know, open this discussion up to anyone who has a question about it, but, and if there are no further questions, we just need a simple motion and a vote to approve, allowing, a few plants to be put in on, lands that Norton Conservation Commission has jurisdiction over.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the chestnut planting as suggested or as outlined. Or...
Second,
So we have a motion made and seconded, and just to be sure, no further discussion. If not, we can consider a roll call vote, beginning with Mark and Dan.
Aye. Aye.
And Joe and Paxton.
I
Aye.
Dama,
I,
and I'll throw in an aye, the motion carries. Our next item.
Before we start, I'd like to actually, there's a gentleman here, Nolan, who came in last week. I was going to actually put this on the agenda, but he came in. He's had some issues with flooding with the most recent rain events that we've had. And before he kind of engages with, you know, discussing with a consultant the potential improvements to the property, he was wondering if he can basically have a discussion with the commission on whether they would be amenable to some work that he would potentially be needing to do within the designated floodplain. He lives at 9 Daniel Street, and he abuts the Wading River. Obviously, we know that the Wading River has been subjected to a lot of issues with rainwater and also high discharge rates, and there's been extensive flooding down gradient of Barrowsville Pond. I don't have screen sharing capabilities anymore because I gave hosting abilities to Megan, but there are some pictures in the Google Drive and also a file which kind of outlines his property, showing the floodplain and some images if you go into 9 Daniel Street. And you can see that the flooding and river waters have really almost come up to the edge of his foundation of his house. So you can actually see on the map, you can actually see that the floodplain elevation kind of goes right to the back of his deck. This is an imagery that I generated through GIS software. But the images themselves, those are kind of a little extensive. You can actually see the images here. So you can kind of get a sense as to his current conditions. And yeah, that's a good picture right there. But that's his yard out back. And as you can see, it's completely flooded. So so the main issue is that he's trying to get a sense and gauge from the commission to see if they would be amenable to you know, working with him, I guess, with work within the floodplain. And obviously a permit would be required to kind of save and kind of shed the water away from his property. But the work will require some grading and also require some maybe a retaining wall or something of that nature. But that all needs to be engineered. But he wanted basically a sense from the commission to see if they would be open to this kind of you know, route before he would start the process with engaging a consultant.
John, thank you. I don't know if I'm allowed to speak.
You can, yeah, sure. Yeah. Open discussion.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, John, astutely put. I really appreciate everyone on the commission. I'm sorry if you hear my son in the background. He's 15 months and just yelling for dinner. So I appreciate that. It's 9 Danielle Street. Not that I don't think you had it right, but I think you might have been saying Daniel, but it's Danielle Street. And exactly as John said, you saw give me 1 second. I'm going to head downstairs. So as John said, you could clearly see in the photos, when we bought our property in 2018, obviously the Wading River's right there. We inquired about flooding from the prior sellers. They told us it didn't really flood, kind of took their word for it. And then, over the years, the backyard is flooded pretty bad, but it's typically been around like November or April. And it kind of just tries to deal with it. But, now that my family's growing, I'm having children, and with the rain we've seen, over the past, month and a half, it's by far the worst I've ever seen it. And so for me, it's a couple things that come into play. One, I have a 15-month-old, and if God allows it, I'll have more children, and I'm terrified of, little children not listening to their parents going in the backyard. Two, with the flooding there, it won't let us build a fence to even keep them away from the river, even if we were able to fix the flooding, which is kind of terrifying. And then three, we just put an expensive deck on our house, and the water's now flooding up to the footings, flooding up to the bottom stairs. Fortunately, our house is like 5 feet up on this like hill. So, as of right now, it's not a problem from the flooding on the foundation of the house. But, with the way that things have been going and the climate changing and getting warmer, I only can imagine and guess that it's going to get much worse. There's really, from what I can see, 2 major choke points, and you can see them really well in one of those photos. The main is from the left side, where it was what I believe is conservation land that's now essentially a tributary, where as the river starts to get a little bit of, depth, it starts flowing directly through there and funnels right into the yard. And then twice in the past month, we've actually seen it in one of those photos you could see come through where we have an arbor and kind of make a second connecting pathway. So I imagine, obviously through the work of an engineer, kind of schedule out a game plan about how or what we could do to potentially stop this. But one of my biggest concerns is, an engineer is not cheap. And the last thing I want to do is hire an engineer to come up with ideally a great game plan and then have, the commission determine that we're not going to allow the permit, making the plans moot. So I was hoping to just come here, get a feel for, what you might be thinking about, or whether you take a little bit of due diligence to look at and just get a feel for, is it going to be money well spent? Can we come to an agreement of what I can or can't do before obviously proceeding with trying to rectify this?
Well, I can comment, and then maybe John can fill in, or whoever else. The Wetland Protection Act is kind of very concrete. In other words, it lays out what can be done to be consistent with the act. And if you can come up with a plan that will be consistent, then we don't stand in the way. And so your answer is going to be really from the engineer. It requires, if part of your project requires filling a portion of the floodplain in one area, the requirement of the act is the compensation. In other words, excavation in another area at the same elevation has to be provided. And it's not clear that your lot would allow that, or some similar excavation somewhere else to compensate. So it's really not, I mean, if your engineer comes up with a plan that's consistent with the act, we can't stand in the way of it. And if we were to stand in the way of it, then you would appeal it, and DEP would allow the project. So it's really more, and let me also comment that the amount of rain that we've had this year is in no way typical. I mean, this is unusual, and even in the context of global warming, that doesn't mean this is going to keep happening again and again and again. So, that can go into your calculation as to whether you want to spend a lot of money to address a problem that might come up once every 5 to 7 years or not. So did that help in terms of understanding what you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like I'm going to have to hope the engineer knows a lot about those laws, because I certainly do not.
Well, let me just comment. Pretty much every engineer does, because 53% of Norton is wetlands, which means they have to be consistent with, every project has to pretty much be designed according to the standards required.
Okay. I mean, if it just comes down to conforming to the law, then if the end, I'm obviously not going to hire an engineer that can, tell me he can either try to work around that or at least be cognizant of it. So,
But that's what they do.
sure.
That's what they do, at least in this town, because they have to.
Okay. No, I guess that's pretty helpful then. I guess it's kind of just start interviewing some engineers and taking a crack at it and see kind of what they can come up with.
Yeah, and I'm assuming you can get a quick look, just have somebody present them with, this is the problem, is there a solution, before you sit down at your computer. And I think they can eyeball the situation without a whole bunch of cost and tell you yes or no. John, do you have anything you would add to that? Or anyone else for that matter?
No, I think, Nolan came into my office last week, and I think that's really it is, the engineer needs to be intuitive and be able to design something that, is going to require, potential fill, but then offsetting that with mitigation, just like you said, Julian, and that's really it. And if everything works out and the compensatory storage outweighs the potential fill that's being placed, then for instance, the commission has an easy way to, give a swift approval based on the design. So that's really it, is just making sure that the compensatory storage mitigation is larger than the extent of fill. And I think that is something that is a possibility. It just needs to be demonstrated.
All right. So just that's extremely helpful. Thank you. So I guess one last question is that if an engineer can't prove all those things, then I'm kind of just stuck. And, Julian, to your point, kind of just hope it is a once every 5 or 6 years thing, and, just kind of more or less deal with it.
Yeah, but I noted your lot has it seems to be tighter than other adjoining lots with regard to the floodplain coming up fairly close to your house.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. None of my neighbors to the left or right of my house have remotely the same type of issues. And, I think it's been something that has just compounded over time, right? I think that tributary that leads from the river through the wetlands, like if as it started to flood in years past, and, nothing was done, not to mention, and I couldn't prove this, but, kind of fingers crossed that nobody else further downriver has done anything kind of without a permit, that could have exacerbated it. And I have some reason to believe that may or may not have happened. But, I think it's something that's just compounded over time.
Well, one thing that you may want to look at is there are natural events like trees falling that can partially obstruct the river. And those things can be cleared. I mean, is that a fair statement, John, that when you have natural events that obstruct the river that can promote flooding, you're allowed to clear some of those obstructions?
Yeah, provided that there's a permit that goes along with those, that's definitely something that we could,
Right.
obviously, when you're working within a resource area, you need a permit to do any sort of activities within a resource area. So, that's kind of the limitations that we have, is that, it's not, we're not going to say that it can't be done and it can't be allowed. We're saying that basically there needs to be, we just need to have record that it was being done.
Sure. And is that like me personally clearing it? Because am I I guess I don't know if I can like scale down the river into people's backyards and take like a look and see if there's down trees, or like wade through the water and see if there's something that is maybe buried. I mean, is that something on the town, or like how do you go about doing that?
So it also depends
Well, I
on
think,
who owns the property where the river is, and that I don't think you own the river. So
Definitely
obvious-
not.
obviously that's not, obviously you would want to reach out to the owner of that property, which I think is part of what the original owner, I can't remember who it is, but I know it's under open space preservation, so I have to look into that and see whose responsibility it is. But if there are any obstructions, we'd have to basically take a look at those and make sure that I mean, I haven't been out there obviously, but I'm saying if there are any, we'd have to identify those and see the best practice and kind of game plan for removing those.
Sure. So I guess my question is that like on me to like go to houses that abut the river and ask to take a peek, or is that something that I like request the town do, because like the river's owned by the town, I'd assume?
So
And-
we can take a look at it. I can take a look to see who owns the property this week, and I can get back to you on that one. But as we move ahead, I would say that that's probably maybe part of the problem, but from what I don't know, I haven't been out there. I'd have to take a look to see if there's any obstructions along the river. If there are, obviously that becomes an issue and we need to clear those up somehow. But if the flooding issues, I mean, we're having flooding issues all over town, and some of the areas are not obstructed, and we're still having flooding issues. So,
Sure.
my whole point is it might not be an obstruction. It's probably just the excessive rain. I think we've gotten about 24 to 25 inches of rain over the first, since today.
Right, right.
So, I mean, that's kind of it. The first 3 months of the year, and we're already at 25 inches. I mean, I think last year we had a total of 72 inches during the year, and that was the most ever recorded in town. So,
Well, John, I would like to just go on record is like I can appreciate that, but I think as I said in my earlier comments, I bought in November of 18, and it is flooded every single year, multiple times throughout the year. Like not to the degree in those photos, but I don't know, 75% of it, like to the point where it's still like extremely dangerous. I can't build a fence. Like it's a liability on me, and so even if it like isn't raining as bad as it has this year, it still floods, which is like not great. It's
No,
just to the
I
extent
understand.
that it's flooded this year is it's where it's now hitting like my like physical property, to where I was like, damn, like my hands were tied. I have to come in and do something. I've been a resident for almost 5 years, for over 5 years. So I think like, regardless of the rain, it's still like a major issue.
right, but, so I think if you can have an engineer just come out and look, they can
Okay.
give you a quick idea as to whether it's feasible to move fill around and provide compensation or not.
Okay, and again, I just want to be clear that like if the engineer can't do that because it involves doing work on property that I do not own and or is conservation, wetlands, etc., then like I am just deal with it is kind of the answer. I'm not saying it's you guys saying deal with it, but like that's kind of the answer.
Well, I mean, there are a variety of things, like you can certainly protect the footings by making, barriers around very local structures so that they're not damaged. But, I mean, the best place to start is have an engineer take a peek, see what they say.
I would call one of those engineers I put on the list for
Yep.
you and have them come out and take a look at the property and see what they would recommend. And just call them and let them know that you're looking for somebody to give you a sense for work in the floodplain, and they're going to need to do compensatory mitigation and what their experience level is. There's probably a couple engineers on the call tonight, that have experience doing it as well. So I just want to, I would just reach out to them, contact them, and see if they can give you a quote to kind of get a sense of if it's a feasible or viable project for you.
Okay. Well, I
Okay.
appreciate everyone's time.
All right, thanks, Nolan.
Thank you.
bet. All right, so we're on to the agenda with new public hearings. First, up on the list is file number 250-1151, 300 South Washington Street. and it concerns a proposal for construction of an indoor self-storage facility associated with parking and infrastructure. Do we have a representative for that project?
Yes, we do. For the record, Mr. Chairman, Eric Dias, registered professional engineer with Strong Point Engineering, representing the applicants.
And you probably have screen sharing capabilities, so if you have a plan, you can throw it up there.
I believe I do. Just half a second, and I will get it up. You should be able to see this plan, is that correct?
We do, if you can magnify it a little bit.
Yes, sir. Okay. So this is from the plan set. This zooms in on the work portion of the site, but I will get to the entirety of the site. This is kind of the easiest way to get our bearings about us. So this is on South Washington Street, right at the City of Taunton line, between South Washington and Interstate 495. A lot of you may remember this. We were before you for an ANRAD on this property toward the end of 2022, and the commission did issue an ORAD. It defined a bordering vegetated wetland that's shown over here, which is the B series, and another wetland that runs actually off the property along the shoulder of the interstate. And just to make things a little more clear and tell the whole story, this is a GIS overlay from the notice of intent that we provided, just showing these are actually the GIS wetlands here. There is a priority habitat mapped on this portion of the property. We're staying well away from it. We're not touching anything within the habitat mapping. The entirety of the site is within the 3 Mile River Watershed HCEC, and most of the site, including the entire work area, which is right here where my cursor is within a zone 2, which is going to have impacts on our required stormwater design thresholds and things of that nature. So just to keep in those items in mind as we move through, going back to the plan. So again, this is the existing conditions plan. This is the portion of the site where we're proposing the work. After we went through the ORAD process, we obviously went through a great design process. We've done test pits all over this site, pretty good sampling to support the stormwater management design. And what we find is that we do have reasonably good and pervious soils on the site, but as you would expect, being surrounded by wetlands, we do have reasonably high groundwater, so that factors into our design. Just to move through the plan set and talk about the proposed conditions. Let me go here to start with. So this is our proposed project. What we are proposing is a 3-floor interior self-storage building. Footprint is 22,500 square feet, which gives us about 68,000 square feet in total. All of our work, if we go down to this sheet showing the grading and the drain design, what you'll see is that all of the proposed work stays outside of the 25-foot buffer zone, as is required by policy in Norton. But we do, admittedly, in some of these locations, get, right up to the 26-foot mark or so. Couple of things that we did in considering this plan. So this particular use designation doesn't exist in the zoning bylaw. The next closest is a warehouse use. So if we were to build this out with the parking requirements for a warehouse use, we would be required to have 85 parking stalls. It is much more than we need practically. They do fit on the site, but it is a lot of impervious area in buffer zones, which means obviously more filling, more disturbance, more stormwater management concerns, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things we did in the planning, well, not even the planning stages, but we worked very closely with the planning board to secure a special permit for a parking reduction. What we're proposing now, or is in fact had been approved for with the planning board, is a reduction to only 30 parking spaces. So we position those parking spaces as far away from what I'm going to call the more valuable wetland, the bordering vegetated wetland B series on the western portion of the site, than the wetland that results from the runoff along the interstate. We put the bulk of those parking spaces over here, outside of the 25-foot buffer zone, and then we would have a few more spaces on this side. We actually tried to eliminate those, but the planning board felt that they were germane to the project, so we put those back in. The total disturbance on the site, like we talked about, is completely outside of the 25-foot buffer zone of the entire site. We are disturbing about 32% in total. 39,000 roughly square feet of that is between the 25 and 100-foot buffer zone. To talk about the stormwater very quickly, we have 2 surface infiltration basins and 1 subsurface infiltration basin and a stormwater depression or a rain garden that we're proposing in the front of the building. The stormwater infiltration basin closest to this wetland complex takes only rooftop runoff. That's the only thing that's being directed to that location. So the water coming into that is clean, which is a bonus or a good thing, considering its proximity to the wetland. The subsurface infiltration basin is taking stormwater runoff from this portion of the parking lot that I'm highlighting here with my cursor. That structure, that catch basin structure, is proposed to be a water quality unit that will filter out any TSS and other contaminants before it enters the subsurface infiltration basin, and then we get a minimum of an 80% TSS removal within that basin. And then the surface basin on this side obviously takes the rest of the site, essentially from this point over, discharges to this catch basin, where we have the same thing. We've got a water quality unit in the catch basin to clean things up before it gets to the subsurface infiltration basin. The design shows that these basins infiltrate almost entirely, though we did equip them with an emergency overflow spillway that is secured with riprap. Because this is in an area of permeable soils and in a zone 2, we are required to have a higher threshold of water quality treatment. We do meet or exceed all of the requirements for water quality treatment and groundwater recharge in this design. We did receive today a proposal for peer review for the stormwater design, which I can't find a reason that the applicant would not go forward with, and I believe that is from Pat Brennan's office, who you're all very familiar with. So certainly that'll be looked at very closely. And the other thing I'll say about this plan is, one, we are proposing a septic system to services. We had originally, when we conceived this project, we were of the understanding that there is sewer in the city of Taunton, right at the city-town line. That is not true. It is actually about a quarter to a half a mile away. So what we propose to do is just go on-site septic. We have a very low usage from this sort of use. There'll be a bathroom that employees and some tenants may use occasionally, but the flows from this are very low. We position the septic on this side of the building because these 2 test pits that you see where my cursor is here and here have the greatest depth to groundwater. For the purposes of the notice of intent, we have shown the leaching field within the 100-foot buffer zone. It's actually mentioned in the notice of intent that it will be our goal when this process goes to septic design that we will remove the leaching field as far out of the 100-foot buffer zone as we possibly can. But we wanted to show it this way, sort of so all bases were covered in the event that we're limited to how much we can move it because of soil conditions. The other thing is we do have town water in South Washington Street. Is my understanding. The status of that water main is unknown. It may need to be inspected and activated. We are working with the water department on that currently, but we have no reason to believe we won't be connecting to town water. And then the last thing that I'll talk about just briefly is we have provided a pretty thorough erosion and sedimentation control plan, including barrier erosion controls all around the perimeter of work, barrier controls prior to discharge to stormwater infiltration structures, construction, stabilized construction entrances, et cetera, et cetera. And just from our prior work in Norton, we know that especially Pat Brennan's review looks for certain details regarding dewatering and construction phase requirements for inspection and monitoring. So we went ahead and threw all those that apply right on the plan on this preemptively to hopefully save a little bit of time and back and forth in peer review. So that is the overview of the project. As I said, I understand that this will very likely need to go to peer review, but I'm glad to answer any questions that you folks have about this so we can incorporate all comments at once, hopefully. And the last thing that I will say is that the planning board, in addition to issuing the special permit for the parking reduction, they did grant site plan approval on this project, subject to it being approved by the Conservation Commission, both with an order of conditions and the issuance of the stormwater permit. I want to bring that up because it's, as you know, it's not the typical course of action for the planning board in Norton, but I think that they were very, very comfortable with this project as presented, so they felt that they could do that in this case. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm glad to turn it over to you and answer any questions that you folks may have.
All right. Any questions from commission members? I'm not sure if John had to step away. I think he probably did to address another meeting. So,
I have a question.
yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Just about the fact that the sewer, that it's now gonna require a septic system. You mentioned that there will be a connection to Norton Municipal Town Water, but that does not also include sewer access?
That is correct. So it is, what we understand is that there is water in South Washington Street that caps basically at the city of Taunton town line. The closest sewer to this project is actually, in fact, I'm going to zoom in on my locus over here. Doesn't really help me. But it is actually all the way down here on Miles Standish Boulevard in the city of Taunton. So the only way we could get to there at that point would be to install a pump station on site and pump it about a quarter or half a mile to the city of Taunton, which is just financially impractical and infeasible when we can easily accommodate a septic system on this site.
So how many employees roughly would be involved with an operation like this? I mean, it doesn't sound like many.
No, in fact, I should have brought the architect, I should have loaded up the architectural plans with me, but essentially the lobby area is proposed here where my cursor is. We're only expecting 2 at most 3 employees at any given time during a shift, during the time that this is open, very likely no more than 2. And again, other than those 2 people who would be in there consistently throughout the day, the only other use for septic would be the occasional toilet flush from somebody using the facilities when they come to drop for pickup.
I
So
have a
this
question.
does require. Oh yeah, go ahead.
My question is snow storage on
Joe?
the site. Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
My question is snow storage.
That is a very good question. Originally, we had snow storage put all the way over here where these parking spaces are, in the front over here and up in this area here. Obviously, snow storage went away when we added these parking spaces. So the discussion that we had with the planning board is this. First, we added notation to the plan stating, and it's right here, that snow shall be stored on site in containment areas outside of the 25-foot buffer zone. And when the site reaches capacity, it's on the applicant to basically cart it off site and dispose of it in accord with all state and local regulations. Now, what I'll add to that though, and it's also something that we talked about with the planning board, our ITE generation data for the number of parking spaces that we need, you can look at this type of use two ways. One way tells us we realistically need 6 parking spaces. The other way tells us we realistically need 9 parking spaces. We're proposing 30. So all of that is to say that there is very likely an opportunity that we could be sacrificing some of these stalls as we get more familiar with the demand on this site to store snow on the paved areas, but away from the stormwater inlets, which would just give us a little bit more capacity on the site.
Could you show me where the stormwater inlets are on the site?
Again, yes. So we only have 2. We have one in this location here, and that feeds this subsurface infiltration basin. So if we were to store snow over here, we'd obviously maybe want to push it down to these couple of parking spaces down here, get it as far away as we possibly can. And then the other inlet is over here. So again, if we were to store snow in this portion, again, we'd want to stick it as far away as we could from the inlets to the catch basins.
Any questions, either from members of the commission or from anyone in the audience? And if not, we clearly need to continue this because of the pending stormwater peer review. So our next meeting is on the 22nd. I suspect that's going to be too soon for the peer review, but is that the preferred date, or the next one after that is the 6th of May?
If possible, Mr. Chair, I'd like to put it in for the 22nd, and if for some reason we're approaching and it doesn't look like we're going to be ready in time, I'm glad to continue it to the May 6th at that point, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Sure.
So unless there are further questions or discussion, I think we can consider a motion to continue this hearing.
I'd like to make
So
a motion
moved.
to continue.
Oh, sorry, Joe.
Well, Joe got the motion and Dan got the second. So
Okay. Sounds good to me.
roll call, Mark and Joe, how do you vote?
Aye.
Aye.
And Dan and Paxton.
Aye. Aye.
And Tama?
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye, so the motion carries. So we'll at least entertain a motion to continue on the 22nd. Otherwise, we'll see you then, Eric.
Great. Thank you all so much for your time. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Thank you.
So next up, is actually 3 hearings, concerning the same large parcel, but it's file number 1152, followed by 1153 and 1154, concerning 0 Crane Street, lot B, C, and D. Do we have?
Julian, I need to step away from this. I have a conflict with it.
Okay, so Joe is noted to be recusing. And do we have a representative of the applicant for this project?
Yes, right here. It's Evan Watson, W Engineering, representing the applicant.
All right, so I think you probably have screen sharing capabilities.
How'd you know? There we go.
All right.
Are we ready to go?
Yeah, take it away.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Again, Evan Watson, W Engineering with W Engineering. And here you might be recognize this project. We were here a few months ago with a ANRAD where we delineated the wetlands, and we're following that up with our notice of intent permits. So this is the cover sheet, basically shows the 4 lots. These lots were approved by the planning board with a Form A plan passed, it's been recorded. And the 3 lots that are in jurisdictional areas are lots B, C, and D. Part of the ANRAD or the ORAD that was issued, it did ask to have the wetland evaluated for vernal pool and other habitat. So while I was putting together the permits for this, it was a little too cold to have that done, but I have talked to our wetlands specialist, Brian Madden with LEC, and it's on the schedule to get out there this week. Now that things are warmed up and we can expect to see any movement vernal pool wise. So I'll step through the plan. And again, you're right that there are 3 separate filings, but I think it stands to reason that we kind of go over them all at once.
If you could,
so
if you could just expand that a little bit, it's a little bit far away.
Sorry, my screen's relatively large. It looks big on my side. So how's that? Is that better? Okay,
Yeah.
great. So the existing conditions here, we have a BVW in the middle. It's connected, there's a culvert that connects it to downstream wetlands here. And then on this side, we have the 3 Mile River. So we have on lot D, we have a buffer zone to the wetlands. And then we're outside, for the most part, of the 100-foot riverfront, but within 200-foot riverfront on this side. There's a small portion of natural heritage area over here on the west side, north being to the left. We did file with Natural Heritage. We're still within the 30-day review period, so I haven't heard back from them just yet. We also conducted test pits on all the lots, so we could properly design any septic system. So because we have the topography is all up and down and you know, all very pit and mound, there's lots of hills, there's some very steep slopes on the side, etc. We will have to do some grading to make these lots a little more livable. As such, we have filed a special permit with the planning board because the amount of land disturbance exceeds their threshold. So we will need a special permit for that. So that's been filed, but we haven't had a meeting with them just yet. But this just shows all the grading that's necessary for that permit.
So this is a prior gravel excavation site. Is that your thought?
There has been in the past. You could see this gravel road that comes here from the farm. I don't exactly know. There may have been, I think the state or somebody came in and took some of this material to use for road building sometime in the past. I don't know exactly when that date was. But yes, this was all mined out through here. You can see the very steep slopes. And then once they had their fill, they gave up and just left. This sheet here basically shows the results of our test pits and shows some erosion control details. And these were some cross sections. Again, this is more relative to the earth removal permit plan. Let me get to the next page. So this sheet here shows the location of the lots. I think I have.
Yeah, there's a significant delay in your screen changes. There we go.
Yeah, sorry. I was looking for another sheet where I had highlighted the lines, but that's on the individual sheets. So what we've done is we've placed the 3 houses here. All the houses are actually outside the 100-foot buffer zone, which is here, here, and there, and here. We've also incorporated some stormwater just by doing some grading. We've created some depressions along the driveway in each case so that we can meet the stormwater standards, which are necessary for your stormwater bylaw. And then we'll also be infiltrating the roof infiltrators. So that's the project as a whole. And I can move into each individual lot. So do you want me to present all three at the same time and then ask questions, or would we like to go for one?
Yeah, I think that will be,
Okay.
I mean, one of the issues is assuming that large wetland functions as a vernal pool. I think maintaining a buffer of vegetation is going to be key. And right now, is the entire site treed? Is that the case or not?
Yeah, with the exception of the existing gravel road that runs through the site, it's treed.
Mm-hmm.
So this is lot B. We placed the house. Obviously, the way the lot is set up, there's no good building spot in the front along Pine Street, so the house is set back in the woods. You can see our tree clearing line, and we've provided grading to leave a mound from the abutting property, and then we've done all of our work outside the 25-foot buffer zone. This driveway is a shared driveway, again, which is subject to the special permit that we filed. We show dry well for the roof runoff, so those have been designed to accommodate the 100-year storm. This is all A soil. It's all very good, well-draining soil, so we'll have an easy time handling stormwater from impervious surfaces through infiltration. And then same thing here, the driveway, there's a little low spot right here, which can take the runoff. We'll go into that. And then I provided a pipe just as an overflow in case we get, something more than the 100-year storm, or there's frozen conditions and it rains or something like that, just so we can overflow through a pipe and not necessarily through the driveway. The septic system, we received comment from, again, through the special permit septic system. He said it looked good. We haven't filed for our septic permit just yet. We're going to wait to get some additional input from this board and the planning board. But he was okay with that, and that these all comply with Title V. We did receive a comment from the water department who was concerned about the long, the length of any proposed water service to Pine Street. So I haven't met with him yet, but we might talk to him, and it might be the purview that we end up putting in a well on these sites that are way out back. But we'll get back to you on that as far as where that would go.
And what is that length? The distance?
Yeah, I can check.
So are we on the order of 1,000 feet, or?
No, this is about 150 feet to the intersection, and the house is about 230 feet from the road. So not crazy long, but long enough where he had some concern with a regular service.
Well, I guess I don't understand, because I mean, I have a 1,000-foot run with a 2-inch line, and there is no problem.
Yeah, he wanted to make sure that we had an adequately sized line versus just putting in a 3/4-inch line. So
okay.
We'll be talking with him about that.
Yeah.
And then, in Norton, they dissuade us from using chambers, so we have a pipe and stone style leaching field with a 2-chambered tank as required. And then we have infiltration chambers for the roof runoff. We do have erosion control plan at the limit of work, and we have toted silt fence with straw wattles.
All right, just as a note, the preference is that the straw wattles don't have a stake through them, they're just the stakes, because that disrupts their function, but,
So
that's
crisscrossing.
yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so that's lot B.
Yes. Lot C is similar as it's on the same shared driveway, setback in the woods. Along the way, we do have a small little depression here, which will serve essentially as a rain garden. And I did again put an overflow, just in case something greater than the 100-year storm comes along. We have a little catch basin with the rim raised up above the bottom, so that any emergency type of flow would be able to flow into that and get into the wetland versus washing through the driveway. Erosion control here. This lot, again, the driveway ends up being the grading for the driveway ends up being close to the 25 no disturb, but the actual house lot, we're able to stay a good amount away. I think we're about 50 feet away from the wetland for most of the lot. Septic system in the front, and then our roof infiltration here in the back. We were able to keep the house and the septic system outside the natural heritage zone, as well as outside the 100-foot buffer here. And just to be clear, the details are the same as what I described on lot B. And lot D is a little bit different. Lot B and C, we received a file number without comment. Lot D, we did receive a file number as well, but we were just reminded to quantify the amount of disturbance within the riverfront area. So start out back here where the house and septic is outside 100-foot buffer zone. Roof infiltrators. We do have a small little rain garden type feature to pick up impervious area from the driveway with an overflow to carry water where it goes in the existing condition to this depression. There are comments about, quantifying the amount of area. So the total amount of area within the riverfront is about 8,300 square feet. And we're proposing to alter about 14, less than 1,500 square feet. So that meets the performance standard of new construction within riverfront area, being that we're outside the 100-foot, it's across the street, and that we have less than 5,000 square feet of impact, or 10%, whichever is greater.
All right.
All three lots, again, I provided with calculations to show that we meet the stormwater standards and the standards of the Town of Norton bylaw. And again, I know we have to still come in with our evaluation of the wetland and hear back from Natural Heritage. So I'm not expecting that we get approval tonight, but I would like to take the board's input, and if there's anything that you believe we don't comply with the act or the bylaw, please let me know, and we'll make sure we can address those items.
Yeah, unfortunately, our director, John Thomas, had to step away to another meeting, and I kind of need his input. One of the comments was that this project likely will require some level of peer review with regard to stormwater, meeting stormwater requirements, although John it needs to definitively speak on that. Now, did he, in your discussions with him, suggest peer review or not?
He told me everything was perfectly fine. No, I'm just kidding. He did not, we didn't enter in that. He did send me a comment that we did need to have the evaluation of the wetland, but I haven't heard anything else about third-party review or anything of that nature.
Yeah, well, he is the responsible for
Mhm.
stormwater evaluation here in the town, so he needs to give us definitive comments, and we're awaiting the more thorough evaluation of that wetland area with regard to whether it's a vernal pool. So we will need to continue this, but before we do that, we're going to open up to general questions and at first
Sorry,
questions.
Julian, I just had one quick question
Right, right.
about the driveway for lot C, which you said comes right along the 25-foot buffer. Is there no other, I don't know, less impactful way to put that driveway in?
So we're also trying to keep a buffer between the existing butter and the project. So I wanted to leave, obviously the board's more concerned about the wetland, but I think where I placed it, I'm right in the middle of the frontage here. And by placing it here, I'm able to provide a buffer to the abutter and to comply with 25-foot no disturb zone through here. You can see there's this pretty large hill here, and there's a valley right there. So placing it here gives me a good opportunity for a stormwater control in this location, and then also to keep this mound here and keep trees on it, etc., to screen the other abutter. But that's why it was placed that way.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commission members?
Julie, you've got a hand up.
Right. Yeah, we were gonna get there very shortly. So if no other commission members have questions, Mr. Is it Tenor or Tenor?
Yes, sir. Jim Tenor. I'm one of the abutters on Lot D, but I also serve on the zoning board, so I know that that driveway is a common driveway and it is a special permit. It's not by right, it's only by special permit.
Right, but the decision on that doesn't involve conservation, so that's something that they'll have to get cleared through.
Correct, but if it doesn't get approved, then that has to become that driveway can't be common, they'd have to move that over and it would be in the 25-foot buffer. So, just FYI.
Any comment on that, Aaron? What has there been feedback on the approval?
We haven't received
No?
feedback from that yet. Nope. But when we filed for the special permit for the earth removal, we also included our application for the shared driveway. So that's going to be brought up at the planning board relatively soon.
All right, perhaps another issue that will need to be resolved before we can close. So any further questions or comments from anyone?
Julian,
Yeah,
so I was just looking at my notes, and I think the reason John had requested a peer review for the stormwater was because the 4 lots proposed, I believe, constitute a 4-lot subdivision instead of single family. And I think that makes them qualified under the stormwater handbook.
okay.
I don't know how you want to respond to that, Evan. And I don't know if you want to have further chats with John Thomas about that. I just think that's part of some of the comments that he wanted the board to discuss.
Well, certainly, I can talk to him a little bit more about that. Generally, a Form A isn't necessarily considered a subdivision, and we do have 3 lots here, which require notices of intent. So it was a little bit of a gray area. I don't mind, if, and again, we didn't receive any comment back from DEP about requiring the stormwater checklist be sent to them. They were okay. So I did do a report that fully complies with the Massachusetts stormwater regulations. So, if that's the decision, that's perfectly fine. I value his opinion a lot. So, I'd be happy to talk to him about that and see what he'd like to do for a peer review or not.
All right, and so that, yes, clearly we, as I mentioned before, we need input from John as to how that will be addressed, as well as the evaluation of the vernal pool evaluation. So if there are no further comments or discussions, we can.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask one quick question?
Sure.
If it is John's purview that this be sent to peer review, would that be something that he could initiate versus having to come back to the board to request a vote and all that type of thing, or how's that work?
It's my sense that he can, initiate that himself because, the criteria will be established and that's part of the process. So I don't think we need to have a formal vote for that.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll look forward to talking to him this week about it then.
And there was a hand up. I don't know if we addressed the question or not. Mr. Dion had a hand up. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
All right. Neil Dallin, I live at 171. I'm in the middle of all this, right in the center there.
Okay.
And I know we didn't talk, Evan didn't talk about Lot A, but I wanted to mention that Lot A has also a potential vernal pool on it, which is right across the street from the certified vernal pool.
And then maybe you can address where that potential.
I'm not 100% sure, but I'm expecting it might be this small depression right here.
That's correct.
So I know when I went out on site with Brian Madden, our wetland scientist, I asked him to specifically look at this area and any other areas that have depressions throughout the site. So he took a look at that, and there was no indication that was a vernal pool or had any type of wetland characteristics at all. I could get some more clarification from him if you'd like. I could, because he'll be out here evaluating this area, and I can certainly ask him to do some more evaluation on this spot as well.
All right, my door's right in the middle of that. I was just knocking a door.
All right. Well, that will help clarify that if they can that. All right. So I think we may be ready for a motion to continue, and I'm assuming our next scheduled meeting, which would be the 22nd of April, would be your preferred time of review. Either if everything isn't complete, we can certainly continue it again at that time.
Very good. Yes, I'd like the board to consider continuing, please.
So moved.
Second. So we have a motion by Dan and seconded by Mark. So roll call vote, beginning with Dan and Mark.
Aye.
Aye. And Paxton and Tama.
Aye.
Aye.
And Joe, I missed you. I hope I didn't. Oh, you have to recuse. Is that correct, Joe?
We are recusing.
Okay, excellent. So I'll throw in an aye, and the motion to continue passes. So Evan, see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. What was the date on that continuance?
The,
April 22nd.
our next scheduled meeting, which is April 22nd.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, there are three different file numbers that are included in this motion: 1152, 1153, and 1154. So we are now finished with the new public hearings and moving on to continued public hearings. And again, we have a project which has two separate file numbers, but we've been discussing as one project, 250-1129 and 1130, lots C and D at 0 Mansfield Avenue. Do we have a representative of that applicant?
We do, Jack Jacoby, 144 Bank Street, attorney for the applicant, but I'm going to turn it over to Dan Campbell, our engineer, to make the presentation.
Good evening, Dan Campbell, Level Design Group, on behalf of the applicant. Last time we appeared before the commission, we had one minor modification that we needed to work out with your peer review consultant. That minor modification was complete, and if I was able to share, I can certainly show you what that was. And then Janet did approve and sent back to John the following day, which would have been last Monday, I believe, her approval of the project.
You should have sharing capabilities.
We do now. So, lot number C is where the modification took place, although as you've seen, we have lot C and D together on the plans as a whole. The lot number C plans, it was the left-hand side, if you remember last time we spoke, of lot C. We were talking about the water flow that was coming off the building to the top of this wall. Peer review.
Hang on just a second. Your plan was there, and now it's a blank screen. I'm not quite sure what happened.
Are we back?
And now you're back. Yes.
All right, perfect. Sorry about that. It was the water on this building for lot C coming to the top of this wall that the peer review consultant was a little concerned about. So we added the swale at the top of the wall. We added a small depression, and the final modification in the review was this 6-inch pipe that is level, basically just providing the water that would have come off of here, come around and come down to the wetlands, so that it never enters the neighbor's property and comes straight along the back to the wetlands itself. And that was the final modification that the peer review consultant requested of us. Nothing else about the plans as they were presented even a month and a half ago has been modified.
Just to clarify, because I've seen, and I don't know if this really is within our jurisdiction, but the original project was 3 24-unit buildings.
Correct.
And then on this, you had on lot D a 24-unit building, and here this one is a 36-unit building. Is that
correct?
That's correct. Okay, because on another plan you had 2 24 units, so I was just
the original project was, as you remember, 3 separate applications, 3 24-unit buildings. Through discussion with the planning board was concerned about lot D, which is our lot at the edge of Reservoir and Mansfield Ave. The tree cover, as well as the adjacency to the edge of the wetlands. So we withdrew lot D both from the planning board and from yourselves. Lot E from the planning board and from yourselves, and lot D and lot C were modified. D was modified to basically contain an extension of the parking lot, and lot C was modified from a 24 to a 30-unit building.
All right, but as I understand it, the single outstanding issue was, the potential problem of dumping overflow water onto the adjoining property that has been resolved.
Correct.
So I believe we can close this hearing tonight. So, any questions from the commission? And any questions from anyone in the meeting? So if not, we can consider a motion to close as a joint motion, 250 file number 250-1129 and 1130.
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion made by Dan, seconded by Tama. Roll call, Dan and Paxton. How do you vote?
Aye.
Aye.
And Joe and Tama, how do you vote?
Aye.
Aye.
And Mark?
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye. No, the motion carries.
I believe Joe has to abstain because he wasn't here for the other ones.
Yeah, I think you're right, because the only way he could participate is if he reviewed everything, which is kind of a big deal. So, all right, we'll record you.
I withdraw my vote.
Well, we'll change that to an abstention. All right.
Mr. Chairman, how would you then be proceeding? Would you be asking John to draft something and take it up at a future meeting, or would you be acting tonight?
He would be drafting an order of conditions, and we would be considering it at our next scheduled meeting.
So that means that we would be finished for tonight, and we would listen to your deliberations in 2 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, that's a standard practice that we would.
Just wanted to confirm, because a few weeks ago, John had said that he might have a chance to draft some conditions for you, but I guess he's been busy.
Yeah, we don't have those on our agenda tonight.
Okay, just wanted to be clear. And just please understand, we're on with the planning board tomorrow night, so I don't want to misrepresent any situation to them.
Well, I think what you can represent to them is that the public hearing is closed. Public hearings have been closed. The peer review points of discussion have been resolved. And the next meeting, you will have an order of conditions.
Thank you very much.
All right, very good. All right, next item is file number 250-1143, 360 Southwestern Street, concerning construction of a 35,000 square foot warehouse with parking lot. Do we have a representative of that applicant?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, this is Carlos Sculte with CEC, trying to turn my camera on. How are you?
Very good.
Thank you. With your permission, I'd like to just walk through the project. It's been a while since we've been in front of the Conservation Commission with this project, and I will share my screen. Very good. Can everybody see what I have in front of us?
Yeah, you'll have to increase the size a little bit if you can.
Sure. Let me provide the high level overview, and then I'll zoom into the project a little bit to provide an overview of the work itself. So the site itself is along the roadway here. We have a proposed warehouse with a small incidental office space proposed on the project here. We were in front of the Conservation Commission late last year about the proposed work. And one of the issues that came up was the original delineation of the wetlands at that point. It had been some time since the original surveyor on the project had identified the wetlands. We were asked to refresh them. So we engaged a wetland consultant, Ecosystem Solutions, to provide a new wetlands delineation survey along the outer edge of the wetlands here, which are bordering vegetated wetlands. Just to reaffirm the previous delineation and adjusted a few wetland flags in certain locations to account for small changes since the original delineation. A big part of what they also looked at was whether or not the former Wading River had in fact been blocked off from passing beneath the railroad tracks and traversing through the site. The FEMA floodplain maps and flood insurance studies did reflect that that had been blocked off with the 100-year floodplain north of the railroad tracks. And that was confirmed with the site investigation identifying that there was no longer a hydraulic connection for the Wading River to pass through the site. So that was confirmed in that it is bordering vegetated wetlands here that we have along the edge of the project. And then there was also an email that we received from the conservation agent identifying a few things to take a look at as well, consistent with one of the previous applications you heard earlier this evening. The time of year didn't allow us to identify the presence or lack thereof of vernal pools within the site, other than identifying potential vernal pools in some of these areas. So I think that is an area that we're going to have to look into a little bit more with the wetland consultant as the weather is now turning. I think you'll probably find a number of applicants in front of you that are going through that process now. So we did update the plans to reflect the revised wetland delineations. We confirmed that the Wading River no longer flows through the site based on peer review comments that we did receive from PGB Engineering. We also included some additional edits and modifications to the stormwater design, which included confirmation of a mounding analysis beneath the proposed recharge system that identified that the appropriate setback from the groundwater table was provided, as well as providing some supporting analysis as it related to essentially the equivalent of a water tributary area budgeting to those areas that would be potential vernal pools. Just to make sure that by reducing the surface runoff to match the peak rate criteria from the stormwater standards, that we also introduce sufficient recharge that replenish the groundwater table in such a way that it would feed those potential vernal pool areas as well. So attacking it from both the surface water as well as the water recharge. So we did some of that additional work. We understand that there is a little bit of extra work that needs to be done as it relates to verifying some degree of certainty in these vernal pool areas, but we're happy to look at that in a little more detail. So we understand there's some outstanding issues. We don't anticipate any action tonight. We also look forward to receiving some feedback from the peer review consultant, just confirming that the comments were satisfactorily addressed. And we welcome any additional comments. And just as a quick refresher, some of the work that was being proposed on the project included clearing of this previously undeveloped site. We are providing a zoning compliant parking plan. We do have the project in front of the planning board. It's been taking a little while to get them to open the hearing on that, but we're hopeful that that process will happen shortly, and we'll be able to be in front of the planning board to receive any comments along this way as well. The site design is done in a way that we're minimizing the work within the 100-foot buffer zone. We are proposing all of the pavement in the impervious areas is staying as landward as we can of the site. And then of the 33.5 acre site, we're only developing a little under 5 acres of the site. So we are keeping 85% of the parcel as open space or vegetated areas as part of the project. We do have passenger car access for the parking of the employees at the westerly end of the entrance. In accordance with the planning board regulations and guidelines, we have a wider entrance and throat for the vehicle loading as well as the storage for the vehicles and incidental equipment in the area here at the easterly end of the site. Retaining walls proposed along the edges of the work to minimize the amount of overall disturbance of the site, and also maintain the 25-foot buffer zone around the perimeter of the site. We do have a full stormwater management plan prepared, ultimately based on the vernal pool criteria. One of the questions was about potentially shifting some of these stormwater systems outside of the 100-foot buffer zone to provide additional setback to those vernal pool areas. That's something that we'll have to take a look at depending on the feedback on one of the potential vernal pools that was identified in this area, just to adjust the stormwater system in that respect. And then on the easterly edge of the site, we have a portion of the roof areas as well as the trench drains running through a subsurface infiltration system in this area as well. If needed, based on presence of vernal pools in these areas, we may have to rotate and shift the stormwater system to pull it back a little bit further from the wetlands areas to stay fully outside the 100-foot buffer zone. And as far as a utility design standpoint, we did work with some of the comments that we received from the fire department. So we added some additional fire hydrants around the site to provide some enhanced coverage of the building from a utility standpoint. We do have a septic system, a very small septic system proposed as part of the project, with some of the additional delineation changes. And again, verification of the presence of the vernal pool. We may pull the stormwater system a little closer to the building, a little further away from those wetland areas to provide enhanced separation there. We also do have a full landscape plan being proposed around the perimeter of the site. We are revegetating, providing evergreen buffers and shrubs along the frontage of South Worcester Street to provide natural screening and vegetation from these areas. We're also introducing perimeter landscaping to reintroduce buffering along the westerly edge, and also introducing additional landscaping that we have within this portion of the site to provide further enhancement and screening to provide a visual buffer from the public right-of-way. So again, very high overview of the project. We do welcome any follow-up comments from the board, from the commissioner, or from the conservation agent, or the peer review consultant as well. So with that, welcome any comments you may have.
So, unfortunately, I mean, it's been a while since we've reviewed this, and I guess my question is, I believe this required peer review. Is that correct or not?
Correct. There was a peer review performed, and then we did respond. We provided a memorandum summarizing our responses to the peer review comment letter, so that should be in your file. I believe that was provided early last week. Happy to walk through some of those comments, but they mostly focused around the design of the stormwater management system, and then just the questions about the vernal pool habitat or potential vernal pools were raised by the town's conservation agent.
So normally, John would be able to participate in the meeting, but unfortunately there was a conflict and he's currently participating in another meeting. So I think we have to wait with regard to potentially closing the hearing if there are no further issues. Potentially a draft of the order of conditions can be completed and we can close at the next meeting and then act on the draft. But right now, we need his input and can't get it. But first, are there any questions from any members of the commission? And if not, any questions from anyone in the hearing? So, to my review, you've addressed everything that needs to be addressed, but I think we just need the input of John to be sure that there's nothing that he felt needed to be addressed. There's really nothing in the notes that he provided. So, but I mean, he received additional information on the 3rd. I just have to be sure he had an adequate time to review everything. So I assume continuing this will be acceptable.
Yes, we're fine. If you need an email or any sort of documentation requesting continuance, if verbal is okay, that's acceptable to us as well.
All right. So unless there are further questions or discussion, we can consider a continuation for file number 250-1143, 360 South Worcester Street, continued until our next meeting on the 22nd.
I can make that motion.
So moved. Oh, okay, I'm second.
All right, we have a motion made by Paxton, seconded by Dan. And roll call vote starting with Dan and Tala.
Aye.
Aye.
And Paxton and Mark.
Aye.
Aye.
And Joe, I think, again, you'll probably have to enter an abstention because of being a new member.
Abstain.
And I'll throw in an aye, so the hearing is continued.
All right, thank you very much. And that date again I missed?
It is the 22nd of April. It is 2 weeks from today.
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Okay.
So our next item on the agenda is file number 250-1144 concerning a 14 lot subdivision on Reservoir Street. Do we have a representative of the applicant?
Mr. Chair, my name's Ned Corcoran. I'm an attorney in Milton, 26 High Street in Milton, representing the owner, developer, and I'm joined by Cameron Campbell from DeSalbert Sala Associates. Cam is the project engineer. I think the matter was continued from a couple of months ago for the receipt of the peer review of the project and obviously Cam's preliminary comments with respect to that. He has filed those comments and I think he's ready to present with respect to his response to those comments, and then we'll open up obviously to any questions or concerns that the commission may have. So thank you.
And Karen, you probably have screen sharing capabilities.
Yep, I'll put that up now. Can you all see that?
Not quite yet. There's always a lag. All right. Yeah.
So I'll just run through it quickly, just to refresh your memories, because I think the last time you saw it was in January. This is a 28-acre piece of land that's fully wooded at the moment, and it has frontage along the Norton Reservoir and frontage on Reservoir Street. It was approved for a 14-lot subdivision previously, which is here. And we came in front of you with the stormwater design, and we had peer review comments from Witten and Horsley. And I know the peer review comments our response did not get to you guys until I think today. So we were looking just to present this, and then with the notion that we were going to be continued to the next hearing for the chance for the peer reviewer to review our comments, our responses, and for John Thomas also review as well. So the project is 14 single-family lots with the potential for 3 of the lots to have duplexes with a special permit. And get to the main site plan. So here's the main grading. It's basically the roadway. You come in off of Reservoir Street, and we have a little bit of fill along a bordering vegetated wetland to the northeast. And then it follows the grade to the best we could do, and then wraps around to the rear, loops back around, and comes back out to Reservoir Street. But there's 3 major wetland areas within the development. The wetland associated with the Norton Reservoir at the rear. There's a wetland at the front northeast, and then a wetland off to the south. And there's a potential vernal pool in this area, which we are remaining 100 feet away from all roadway and drainage structures. I know that one of the major comments from the commission previously, and the peer reviewer also brought it to light, was we did not include any impervious area for the lots themselves in the stormwater design. So we went ahead and recalculated the stormwater, including a 20% impervious area on the lot's buildable area. Because if you remember, this particular development has a significant conservation restriction being proposed along with it, which is 60,000 square foot lots. If a couple of them are 80,000, and the lots are being restricted down to 20,000 square feet buildable areas, or 30,000 square feet buildable areas in the 3 larger lots. So we took 20% of that buildable area and assumed that it was impervious, and included that in the stormwater design to accommodate potential houses being developed on sites. And the way the stormwater design could handle the impervious as it was. We made some minor changes based on the peer review comments. They asked for more detail on, there's a constructed stormwater wetland down here. We included a detailed profile of the wetland. And then there's also a rain garden down here at the front. And we also include another detailed profile of that as well on the plan set, which is in the detail sheets. And then, and if you go into the rear, there's a detention basin here that we've also have a detailed profile of. We are looking for a waiver on the Norton Stormwater Management Standard 10AI, which is, it requires you to retain the first inch of runoff on site. Due to the soils on site, the soils are mapped C/D soils with that high groundwater, and there's some areas of ledge. This site does not lend itself well to groundwater infiltration. It's more just, but as it is now, it kind of just runs off and goes into the wetlands, hence why the wetlands are there. It doesn't really infiltrate into the ground very well, and we're looking for a waiver on that inch because we met it to the maximum extent practicable. With the detention basin and the constructed stormwater wetland and the rain garden, they'll have infiltration, but as much as they can based on the soils on the site. We do have 5 pre-treatment water quality chambers. One is here. There's another one here, another one in this location, and then 2 out front, which for every set of catch basins and pipes being directed towards the stormwater basins, they go through a water quality treatment unit prior to entering the basins to further treat for TSS removal. And to meet that 90% TSS removal requirement for the stormwater regulations, and also to meet the 60% phosphorus removal from the stormwater regulations. There's another, in the front, there's a water quality structure here and here prior to going into sedimentation basins. And then at the rear, there's also a large water quality filter tank, which will have, it's a 8x24 tank. It's got, I think, 50 filters in it, and it's to treat the final outlet from the detention basin to give a final treatment to meet those TSS removal, phosphorus removal regulations prior to it being released to the overland to the Norton Reservoir. The peer reviewer did ask for a detailed calculations on sizing all the outlets that we have, and we provided those in the comments. They haven't had a chance to review them yet. And I would like to point out we are encroaching 2 of the outlets. If I can zoom in to the back, 2 of the outlets in the front portion of the site, due to elevation, slightly encroach into the 25-foot no disturb. There's one here. There's a proposed retaining wall along this portion of the road to not encroach, to have the grading not encroach into 25-foot no disturb. There's a new proposed double culvert underneath the road here that will direct the majority of the stormwater runoff coming over land and pipe it under the road so that doesn't flood out the road and the properties. And the outlet riprap encroaches into the 25-foot no disturb. And then as well as the outlet for the constructed stormwater wetland has a small outlet riprap that also encroaches into the 25-foot no disturb. There's really no, due to elevation restrictions on site and the height of groundwater, those are the limit that we're stuck to. And it's really a minor disturbance with just an outlet riprap that'll be, all the rest around it will be revegetated along with the disturbance. You just have a new rock riprap outlet to protect from scouring of the outlets. So to keep sediment out of the wetlands. And I also I know Mr. Kardish, you were concerned about the abutting property, I believe, with the stormwater design, if that was correct.
I was,
Yeah.
and since then I've looked at the abutting property and noted that the house built there is basically built on complete fill.
Yeah,
so it
it's
appears
about,
not to be at risk.
Yeah, it's about 5 feet.
out.
It's about 5 feet higher than what the wetland's at. And then the wetland actually has a hydraulic connection out to the reservoir. So in order for the water to get to that house, it would be significant flooding of the entire area. And you'd essentially need 5 feet of water to get to the house. And we're also decreasing any peak flows. We're also decreasing any of the peak volume, peak flows going to that wetland so that it doesn't have a large amount of water going to it at once that'll cause it to flood, based on required by the Mass Stormwater Handbook. At that point, those are the major changes. The peer review was mostly for the stormwater management system. There were some technical questions that they had, which we've answered, along with the outlet sizing and whatnot. And then they asked that we send a copy of the operation and maintenance plan over to the highway department, because our goal is to have this road accepted by Norton. So if the town does accept it, then eventually they would be responsible for the maintenance of the stormwater along with all the other utilities in the roadway. So they asked if we would send over a copy of the operation maintenance plan to the highway department so they can review it so that they're satisfied with it. And we've done that. I'm still waiting on a response from their review.
All right. Are you up for questions now?
Yep. I'll answer anything you want.
So basically all of these houses will be on slabs. Is that the thought?
It's not determined yet. I'm not sure what it's based on what the developer who buys what the person who buys the lot wants to do. It is within the Water Resource Protection District, so there are limitations what you can do. But the new construction nowadays, a lot of people are building within the groundwater. They just have sump pumps or French drains, and but it would be under building department review prior to any sort of building permit is pulled.
Well, I mean, here you're presenting that the site is so problematic with regard to infiltration that it can't tolerate the first inch of rain. I can't imagine, even having a crawl space. And I'm very familiar with this area because I live literally down the street, and and it's all underlaid with ledge. There's very little topsoil.
Yeah, I did 5 test pits out there, and I was able to get the area has a little bit of soil. I was able to get at least 8 feet down on all of them.
Really?
And yeah, it's just really tight dirt. It just doesn't lend well to the water leaching into the ground. It just runs off. With a higher groundwater table due to the fact that it can't leach through the soils.
If I may, Julian,
yeah,
I think your concerns were echoed by John Thomas at a previous meeting. I think this is ground we've been over, that this is an area that is prone to flooding.
Well, certainly during these repeated large storms, there's standing water everywhere. There's water running down Reservoir Street for literally a week at a time. So, and now as I understand it, this project requires a sewer line being extended. Is that correct?
Yes, it requires a sewer line coming down between Acre Road and Elm Street. It's about 1,300 feet. There'll be a gravity line from that point to the front right corner of the lot here, and then it'll be a forced sewer throughout the development. I currently just got the peer review for the sewer extension a couple weeks ago. I haven't gotten to it yet, and we're working with them on the finalizing that as well.
All right. Now, unfortunately, our director is not able to because he was called away to another meeting. So this is going to require a continuation, and the planning board has completed its review. Is that correct?
They approved the 14-lot subdivision. We still have to go. I believe there's a special permit for affordable housing that we still need to go through, but the subdivision itself is approved.
They voted planning board voted in October to approve the subdivision. We do have to file for a special permit to address the affordable component issue. We do have to provide 10% of the units as affordable. I think we have to do at least 2, given that there are 14 lots. We're also pending review at within the town and at the state environmental office with respect to the proposed draft of the conservation restriction. The language of the restriction needs to be approved by the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. I don't have a status on that to report. So those are a couple of other outstanding issues that are Obviously significant to the project, but remain to be addressed.
The other issue that I had not previously heard was requesting a waiver with regard to the stormwater retention of the first inch, and I think John is going to have to comment on that.
Would you like me to comment on it now?
Well, you have appeared magically, reappeared magically. So yes, that is something we need to hear about.
So what would we like to hear about? That it's a local bylaw requirement to meet the 1 inch threshold, and given that the area has been subjected to a lot of precipitation events this season and last season, and knowing that Reservoir Street floods, I think it should be taken into consideration given the potential problems in the future of the area.
And I would like to state that this development, as it's graded, has no runoff flowing to Reservoir. We're at kind of a high point on Reservoir, and Reservoir kind of pitches to the left and right at the front of the lot. And the roadway gets collected prior to it ever reaching Reservoir Street. So all the runoff from this roadway will go into our stormwater drainage systems.
So I guess my question is that how much area would be, I don't know, I guess, what would be required to meet the 1 inch threshold?
I don't have the number off the top of my head. It'd be an inch over all of the impervious area on site. So it's essentially the same volume of the water quality treatment area. It would have to be retained on site, which these soils don't meet the minimum infiltration requirement for the state standards. And the state standards allow for a detention style system like this with C and D soils and ledge at the surface. This meets the state standards. It's just the local bylaw that we don't meet.
Right. So the other thing to take into consideration, obviously it hasn't been finalized yet, but the Wetland Protection Act's being, I guess, revised to accommodate climate resiliency, and also the Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook's going to be going through a revision kind of procedure as well. Obviously, it hasn't been approved yet either. I guess my whole take on this is, we have just dealt with an issue over on Barrows Court that anyone in town will be able to basically talk about, that was built in the 70s, and it was done by the standards back then. Everything was installed per the standards. Well, unfortunately, 50 plus years later, we've had some issues, and flooding has persisted and become a problem for the residents and everyone else. I'd rather kind of set up some sort of system now that's not going to impose those sort of impacts in the future for the residents that may occupy this area here, and also the areas that border Reservoir Street. So, I don't know if, that's something to take into consideration. But I think, meeting the 1 inch, if you can basically show that you can meet the 1 inch threshold, that would be the preferred alternative. And I think, it's just something that needs to be evaluated, and what the alternative would be. I can't tell you that. I think the peer review consultant's going to say that, this doesn't meet the bylaw. It needs to be modified or changed. Because what they do in their evaluation is they look at, the Stormwater Handbook, and then they look at our local bylaw. So unfortunately, I can't say anything more to that. I just think it's just something that needs to be investigated, and it needs to be, fleshed out as to kind of, meeting that. So that way, this project would be something that meets our current standards as it pertains to stormwater.
And I would say the detention basins those were all designed with a foot of extra storage per the standard. And to meet that infiltration, to retain it on site, you would essentially take the outlets are designed at the bottom of the basins so that they drain out of the basin to meet that standard, you'd raise up the outlets to provide storage at the bottom that doesn't go through the pipe originally. But you'll end up having standing water in the basins for a significant amount of time due to the fact that the soils don't infiltrate water. So you end up creating a hazardous situation and mosquito breeding grounds and whatnot with just standing water in the basins consistently after large storm events.
Sounds like there's a little push-pull that we need to work through, John, on that, and, we'll spend some time addressing that and, being properly responsive to the best that we can.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I mean, the peer review consultant's gonna be able to provide us the engineering, backing and everything like that. When it comes to meeting certain thresholds, obviously, I don't know if, this would be something that, because it's stormwater related, the Stormwater Authority would be willing to waive. And that's just kind of our standards. And unfortunately, we've never waived that threshold. Everybody has met that threshold since I've been here. And so I think since the bylaw has gone into place, there has been no waiver for that. So, I mean, this would be a unique request and a unique grant if that was, something that the Stormwater Authority would be willing to do. I'd have to talk to them about that, obviously. But that's something that I would have to talk internally with them. But my inkling and my understanding is they'd probably not be, willing to grant that waiver. So I honestly think that it's probably in the best interest of this project to try to pursue, alternatives that would potentially provide that. And that's all I can say more to this topic. So I'd like to see a design that tries to meet that.
Yeah, and the stormwater, the peer review did originally, they commented based on meeting the infiltration, and their comment was essentially, we originally had impervious barriers at the bottom of the detention basin in the rain garden to prevent any groundwater infiltration into it, because they don't meet the 2-foot groundwater separation. We're a foot off of the groundwater. And they requested that we remove the impervious barriers to infiltrate to the maximum extent practicable based on the site conditions. So they asked that we just remove the impervious so that it will infiltrate as much as it can based on the site conditions. I believe that was comment number 3 from them for their standard 3 requirements.
I mean, I'll let the peer reviewer comment on this moving forward with this new design. I think we sent it over to them today. I believe Megan sent it over to them today. They'll get a response back. And if they provide a recommendation saying that it's okay to waive the 1-inch threshold, then we'll take it into consideration. But obviously, that's for the Stormwater Authority to approve or deny.
Yep. Thank you.
So it sounds like, unless there's further questions or discussion, that we would entertain a motion to continue. And I'm assuming that would be until the next regular scheduled meeting on the 22nd.
Yeah, that was our goal was to go to the next meeting on the 22nd to allow the peer reviewer to review our comments.
All right.
Julian, I have a quick question.
Sure, Joe. Go ahead.
The work the proposed work being done within the buffer zone in the wetland in the front.
Yes.
It is actually, yes, you're talking about the 2 spots that violate the 25-foot?
Correct, with the riprap.
And I guess the question is, in this circumstance, John, is this something that we are going to allow or request a modification?
So as it comes to outfalls, within 50 feet of a resource area, they're allowed. Obviously, the basin itself is not allowed within 50 feet of a resource area or any sort of infiltration device. The outfalls are allowed, but it is acceptable. Obviously, the area of work will be minimal that they're doing that, but obviously, there's no really room for placing them anywhere else. But I'm gonna let the peer reviewer comment on that. Are those new outfalls or are those the ones that were previously under the old plan?
So the two down here were previously under there. This culvert underneath the roadway is new. It collects the overland runoff along here, and we sized up. The peer reviewer asked us to size up all the outfalls provide calculations for them all, which we've done, and then just shown the proposed size on the plans. So this one at the top is newer.
So I guess if we were talking of disturbance within 25 feet of a resource area, I'm sure there's going to have to be the removal of vegetation. So potential minor mitigation of plantings and things could be a feasible request from the commission for allowing for that to happen. I would presume. So I don't see it as being a major issue, but obviously it's something to add to the design. And also the plan moving forward. I would also prepare having with the plan visual barrier posts at least along the 25-foot buffer in the future, spaced about 50 feet apart, because that's typically what we're requesting for any work or any sort of disturbance at the time.
we can add that to the plan.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think if there are no further questions, we can consider a motion to continue.
So moved.
Second.
So that was motion by Joe and seconded, I think Mark got the second by a few milliseconds. So roll call vote, starting with Mama and Paxton. If you vote.
Aye.
Aye.
And Mark and Joe.
Aye.
Aye.
And Dan?
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye, so the motion carries. So we'll see you guys again on the 22nd.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Next on the agenda is request for certificate of compliance, file number 250-1071, concerning the Mansfield Airport Vegetation Management Project. So John,
So that one had to be moved for a site visit. The site visit wasn't able to be performed, so it needs to be moved to the next meeting.
Okay. So it was a little too wet to.
There was a lot of potential things that happened. Obviously, we've had a lot of events and things. I haven't really been able to schedule many site visits, so I apologize. But I rescheduled it with Mark to kind of go out there and take a look at the vegetative management plan that they have. So I'm scheduled to go out with them this week and kind of try to figure out what the extent of work was and make sure that, for instance, they're in compliance with their original permit. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a vernal pool that we wanted to be sure a lot of debris didn't go into.
Right.
That was, I think, the key issue. But other than that, I don't think there's going to be a closing or anything else that we have to worry about doing a certificate of compliance for. So I'm assuming, Mark, it's okay if we take a little more time next meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Mark Attorno of Gale Associates. We're the engineering consultant for the Mansfield Municipal Airport. I was aware that I figured I wanted to introduce myself since I haven't been before the commission before North, so good evening everyone. But yes, I'll be getting a job listed on site to go over any questions that you may have to for the site.
Okay, sounds good. So we'll table that item. And our next item are orders of conditions beginning with 0 Eddy Street. So, so John, as I understand this color code, yellow is, were those questions, or is this just something different from our basic layout?
So everything that's highlighted documents the changes that I made that I want the commission to take a look at. So that's really it makes it basically your life's easier. So I'm trying to highlight stuff so you know.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is boilerplate.
Yeah, I noticed that, and I was gonna say that without this degree of organization, it was kind of like a confetti cannon coming at you. And this is really a good job. I think I've mentioned it before that it's very helpful in review.
Like I said, I did it for the contractors versus the commission. So it's mainly for the contractors to follow.
But I think everybody can be happy about it, and I like it. So I noticed the other permits and approvals, is that a totally new thing? Because I think we've occasionally mentioned that. But is this going to be a new regular?
That has been in there since the start of the new change, but I've just highlighted it so that way people know that, for instance, it's in there, because obviously there's been some questions from the fire department and some other boards that the applicant has not sought final approvals from. So we may potentially see an amendment come across our desk for this Zero Rear Eddy project if it were to be approved and issued this evening. But that's really out of our hands because applicants are responsible for ensuring they receive all permits prior to any sort of construction efforts. It's part of the general code for any sort of issued order conditions, but we also make it known within our local order special conditions.
So when you issue this, I'm assuming that the purple background doesn't go on the final copy.
No, all highlighted versions of that will be removed, and it will just be a blank white canvas.
But are you saying if it's been overlooked previously that maybe that needs to be in a different color font?
Well, the issue is that we have is most of the time it's black and white anyway that gets printed and recorded. So regardless of whatever font we send over, when it gets recorded, it comes up black and white.
But is it worth trying to emphasize it with maybe underlining, or?
I mean, we could definitely underline some sections. We can italicize. I know Dan Pearson likes to italicize things, so we can definitely do that.
Well, I don't know if italics will. I mean, what you want to convey is that this should not be overlooked, and I think underlining it might be a way to do it.
We can definitely do that.
I mean, anybody else have comments about that? So maybe, I mean, you'll have to try it and see how it looks. It may just get a little too busy. Any other comments on 0 Eddy Street orders? Because we only have a couple of highlighted sections, and everything else I see you have the Meadowbrook Dam issue in there. Questions, comments? If not, we're bumping up against motion time.
So I'll make the motion to approve the order of conditions.
The draft for
Eddie Street.
Eddie Street, file number 250-1136. And do we have a second?
Sorry, can I just ask just one quick question I should have asked before?
Yeah, go ahead, sure.
I'm just curious what we look for when it says provide a lettered affidavit outlining responsibilities and ownership. Meadowbrook Dam, like who is reviewing that, and you know what kind of just considerations go into the affidavit that's provided.
So, for instance, it would be the landowner or HOA. So, for instance, whoever owns the property, I don't know who that's going to be at this point, but whoever the landowner is at the time of, for instance, my guess is it will be Sam that's going to provide a lettered affidavit, who's going to outline who's going to have responsibilities of the ownership of the dam and maintenance responsibilities. So it's basically, it gives us a general understanding of who's going to be responsible for the maintenance and upkeep on that. And if we have that, we use that, and that's going to eventually be part of the permit application. So that way in the future, if anything changes, we can say, well, we still have this affidavit that says that X, Y, and Z is the owner and operator of the dam. Then, for instance, they're still responsible until someone else basically chimes in and says, well, now we are the sole owners of this, because I don't know what his plan is for the pond and the upkeep on that. So he needs to basically provide that before the closeout of the project.
Thank you.
Yep. And that'll probably come in after.
Yeah, Paxton, the subtext is the subtext is that any dam structure carries with it substantial responsibility because of the risk of failure if it's not properly maintained. So when you're looking at future properties, if there's a dam on it, you may want to be fully aware that if you buy the dam, you buy a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, I don't plan on buying a property near dam.
So we had a motion.
Second.
Oh, well, nevertheless. So we had a motion by Tama, and we were looking for a second. We got a second from Mark.
Second.
And we're going to say that with regard to, well, I didn't get that. But with regard to the making the other permit and approvals potentially more prominent, we're going to leave that up to you, John, as to whatever looks good on that, for the intention of being sure it doesn't get overlooked. So with that said, roll call vote beginning with Tama and Paxton.
Aye.
Aye.
And Mark and Dan.
Aye.
Aye.
And Joe, do you feel comfortable voting on this one, or do you want to abstain?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, and I'll vote aye. So the motion carries. And the next one up is 38 Charlotte Avenue. This is the house on Winnicott, where there was a lot of discussion about compensatory storage. And
Just a quick note, if I may, Julian.
Yeah.
If Megan, if you use this for the minutes, Charlotte is spelled, has a spelling error.
What is the correct spelling there?
Charlotte.
Yeah, I saw that afterwards. I was like, oops.
Where are we looking at the errors?
250-1146.
Yeah,
38 Charlotte Avenue.
That's on the agenda. It's in the title.
Oh, yes. Okay. But on the actual order, Charlotte seems to be spelled correctly. Is that right? Because it is spelled correctly on the copy I'm looking at. All right, and here again, I mean, I have no comments other than, I mean, it's very straightforward. So, John, we have DEP's boilerplate, and now we have our boilerplate, all of which is in white. And then we have a couple of specific items.
Correct. Mostly items in here pertain to compensatory flood storage, the elevation certificate, because the house is being constructed, or a portion of the house is being constructed in the floodplain. So mainly all these parameters are to outline local conditions as it pertains to work within the floodplain. So that's mainly this one. I kind of took most of the language from the previous 74 King Philip project that we did and just outlined similar requirements prior to construction, and then also following closeout of the project.
All right. Any questions, comments? If not, I think we may be in line for a motion.
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chairman, to accept the, to issue the order of conditions.
Okay, for file number 250-1146, do we have a second?
Second.
So motion by Dan, seconded by Mark. So Tama and Paxton, how do you vote?
Aye.
Aye.
And Mark and Dan.
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye, and I'm assuming Joe will do an abstain on this one?
Same.
Okay, very good. All right, so our minutes of March 25th. So the only comment I have is the Zoom, once the meeting occurs, the Zoom link becomes irrelevant, is that correct?
I guess it does, yeah.
And then how about the Google Drive link? Does that get preserved and can be reaccessed in the future, or does that disappear as well?
The Google Drive link stays.
Okay. So I guess the only.
So we don't, you're right, we don't need the Zoom link. It does help the person writing up the minutes, because he or she can go back and there's the the link, but you're right.
You're talking about the meeting video.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that should stay, because anybody can just go review it then. That stays on YouTube indefinitely, or?
As far as I know, it gets recorded and it's on YouTube for, I mean, I think we have meetings dating back to when they first started for having these meetings online. So my understanding is it's on there for good. I don't know how long that's going to last, but we do have recordings in the meeting minutes to supplement the actual recording.
Yeah, so that should stay. And I don't have anything else on this. Oh, you got in the under the old business and discussion, you did put an insert here.
Oh, yes, that's right, yeah.
So I don't know if
you read a statement.
Yeah,
And I suppose I could have just tried to copy your statement, but
well, I think the key link you already put, the American Chestnut Foundation, it has a very explicit slideshow that explains exactly what. So I think that's pretty much the extent that it should be in the minutes.
oh, okay. All right. Oh, so you just read something from the American Chestnut Foundation.
No, I think what I read was a text from Dominic, which would be in
that's
tonight's minutes to the extent necessary.
Yeah, that's what I had meant when I said insert here. I meant the text from Dominic.
But I think we can eliminate that.
That's okay.
Any other questions, comments? Motions?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair, to accept the minutes as amended.
Second.
Paxton, that was you, the second.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, so motion made by Dan, seconded by Paxton. Roll call vote, Dan and Tama, how do you vote?
All right.
And Joe, you actually were observing this last meeting. I don't know if you want to throw in an aye or nay on the minutes.
Aye.
He's gonna have to abstain because he wasn't.
Abstain.
Yeah.
He wasn't a member. Okay,
Yeah.
right.
Abstain.
All right, we can throw that in as an abstention. And Mark and Paxton.
Aye.
I said aye as well.
Okay, and I'll say an aye, and so that motion carries. So our next item is report from staff.
Okay, so I am sending in chat a link. Obviously, it's on the website for the town. Hall has posted some information on the significant rainstorms that we've had over the last 3 months so far this year. It's kind of crazy that we've had about almost 25 inches of rain in a 3-month span. But it's here, and we're going to try to do what we can to mitigate for it in the future. But there's been a lot of flooding, a lot of high discharge rates of a lot of the streams here in town. So to put it lightly, Norton's underwater. But besides that, everything's been fun. Been out and about doing inspections, having to go through all my boots probably 3 or 4 times a week. So yeah, they're on rotation now.
Is there anything to say whether is it expected that this will continue to be a heavy rain year? I don't follow forecasting very well.
So unfortunately, the summers, I looked at the almanac, doesn't look good. Looks like we're gonna have another wet summer. I think this might be the worst year that we've ever seen precipitation. Last year we had about 72 inches in total for the year. And in 2010, we had the most significant rain in 1 month. That was 16 inches. January 2024 was the most we've ever seen here in Norton. And then in March, it was the second highest we've ever recorded. So we're set up for having a very difficult wet season and wet year. I can't let you know what Mother Nature is going to do, but obviously it's going to be problematic for us moving forward, especially with a lot of these projects and designs going off the 0.77 coefficient for inches of rainfall per hour, because we're getting these 3.5 to 4-inch rainstorms over a 24-hour period, and it's really putting a lot of stress and a lot of impacts to the drainage systems for sites and also the town as a whole. We've been kind of having a difficult time managing and trying to play catch up with a lot of these old systems that may not have been created efficiently from the 70s and 80s. So we're trying to play catch up here, and it's been kind of difficult for the highway superintendent, his team, and myself to take a look at a lot of these areas. So we're doing what we can. We think that we may have found a solution for Barrows Court. They did all the work out there, so hopefully, during the next significant rainstorm, we can kind of get a better sense as to whether that system is working or there's an improvement to the existing system. But we've had some significant flooding over there that we're trying to alleviate. So, but that's one of a few areas in town that have been kind of subjected to this issue.
Well, I think that this may be a wet year, but there's no way to know if this is a blip or we're becoming Louisiana.
Right, and I know the state kind of lead into kind of a couple other things to talk about. The state's looking at it from a kind of preparing for the worst kind of scenario, so they're trying to revise their the WPI regulations to focus on climate resiliency and trying to find ways to improve infiltration, but also trying to find ways for applicants to arrange their designs. In addition to that, the state's working on revising the stormwater handbook again. And I don't know what the coefficient's going to be for requiring for infiltration. I mean, I know that, for instance, right now it's 0.8 or 0.77 inches. But in our bylaw, we have 0.8. But then, for instance, we asked for old previous development to meet that standard. New current development has to meet the 1-inch threshold, which is, additional restriction. So moving forward is that if the state increases the coefficient of rain, we should probably reevaluate our stormwater bylaw. In addition to that, to try to also help our town out, because I don't know if it's sufficient. If we're getting 3.5-inch rainstorms, and that's the new norm, then something's got to give. We got to make some improvements with these new designs and stuff. But unfortunately, a lot of the development here in town has been created, majority of it. It's only going to be towards the new projects. So that's where it becomes difficult for us to try to help maintain and manage this. A lot of the existing roadways that we have, they've been problematic. There's just a lot to take on. And unfortunately, the town really is at an all-time kind of deficit when it comes to budgets and everything like that. So I actually just came from the finance committee meeting, and basically, they're looking at different directions on the town to go. So I basically told them to strike all the requests for articles for the dams. We currently have we don't have any money for the spending for the annual ODS, the operation of Office of Dam Safety Inspections, but we'll get that on a budget line item moving forward to pay for that. And then all the maintenance and upkeep, we currently have about $55,000 in our Norton Reservoir account for repairs and maintenance and emergency purposes. And then we have $44,000 in our Chartley dam for repairs and maintenance of that one as well. So we'll work towards using those and kind of tapping into those as needed, continually and annually. But at the same time, if in the event that we are handicapped or have some issues with water and everything like that, we'll have to talk to the town about ways to mitigate the damages and things of that nature.
But this certainly can't be a problem just for this.
Sorry, you both were talking at the same time.
I think if this becomes a regional issue,
Julie.
if this becomes a regional issue, the state and probably federal government eventually will begin to funnel resources to help.
I would anticipate that would be the case. I haven't heard of anything as of yet. But if I do hear something, I will let everyone know. I definitely think that if it is a regional kind of issue, the state and also the feds should be providing some sort of emergency funds available, and it should not be something that we have to, file for a grant for and have a 50-50 shot at. It should just be a given that we're given a certain amount of money to, have to assist us with emergency repairs and kind of things of that nature, because every grant that I've submitted since I've been here, we've been denied. So unfortunately, I just don't know what, I know, it's a competition kind of thing when it comes to grants, but at this point, I feel that Norton itself is, we're in basically that red zone of rainfall events, and it seems that we have been subjected to some of the highest rainfall events this season. So I'm hoping the state, does their analysis like I did on precipitation and understands that, hey, Norton may need some financial assistance. But I can't, I'm not the state. I can't, I can't have a plan moving forward with what the state decides.
When do you foresee the new guidance from the state coming out for like the handbook and everything? Is that 2025 or?
Yeah, so the public comment period for the Wetlands Protection Act for the climate portion of it is, the comment period is the end of this month. I foresee maybe them potentially turning that around in 3 months and getting a draft or final draft ready for that to be basically submitted by probably beginning of fall, late summer. That's what I would anticipate. With the stormwater handbook, there's 900 pages of draft that needs to be kind of, reviewed by engineers, and public comment period. That might take a little bit more time. So that was probably next year. But maybe the WPA revisions could come out this year, late this year. But, obviously, we'll see what the state says.
And I just had a second point. I was just wondering maybe if we could create a agenda item next week at the end of the meeting to just maybe revisit the idea of, additional bylaws for just like, the buffer zone, maybe possibly increasing the buffer zone. I know we talked about maybe trying to increase that again. I feel like just with this rain, like, in terms of the public eye, it might be the best shot we have, if this is a high rain year again, to be able to bring public awareness to maybe increasing that. So.
I think that's a great idea, Paxton. I think our goal would be to potentially have something for fall town meeting. I would need to have a draft, I guess worked on or basically generated to discuss and everything like that. I mean, Dan, Paxton, obviously you two, I think, have been kind of, spearheading this local bylaw kind of, potential kind of new thing. So I'm going to let you two coordinate and talk about it. And obviously maybe I can come into a meeting and kind of discuss kind of where we're at. But if you guys are free, this month, probably be a good idea to kind of game plan and strategize on how we can make that work. But
I think fall would be a date we have to present it to the public, or would that have to happen before that?
So we need to have a draft ready for review. Obviously, the board, the Conservation Commission needs to vote on it and basically on a draft at least and review it. So we would need to have a draft probably, late June, early July, and then have something in front of the town quickly thereafter to be on for the fall town meeting. And I think that's in October.
When is the next open space committee meeting?
The next open space committee meeting, Megan?
the next meeting, I believe, is the 17th of April.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway,
Yeah, maybe could I send a, if we, make a oh, sorry. And then Dan, you're talking.
no, go ahead.
If we make a document, could that be something that is shared in Google Drive, just a kind of rolling document for a possible plan for whatever this might look like?
Yeah, when I get back to the office tomorrow, remind me to put it up on the Google Drive. We have a draft that I've kind of looked through and kind of took out a lot of the, I guess, other information that probably would be more difficult to I guess, digest. We've kind of made it a little bit more streamlined and, I guess, vague. Doesn't have a lot of restrictions, but it does outline a template, which gives us the right to initiate regulations on top of the bylaw in the event that we wanted to. So let me do that. Let me put that up on the Google Drive tomorrow, and I'll just let you guys know that it's available, and we can talk about it. You guys can look through it and see if you have any recommendations.
I've written something too, but I don't think I would put it up there yet.
Okay. So I've already spoken about the 2024 significant storm events. That's the link that I gave to you guys in the text or the chat today as well. It's on our website. And then conservation local fees. Obviously, we have the ability to administer additional fees on top of what we currently have for the state fees, and those local fees, those would go towards, it wouldn't go towards anything for conservation because we don't have a conservation fund, but it would go to the general fund, which then could be used and basically put back and given to conservation at a later date. It's been a discussion item as part of the kind of situation we're in to evaluate ways to, have a steady flow of funding and fees for additional things that we may have overlooked with permits and whatnot. So it's something for us to consider. I'll send over another kind of draft for the fee structure. I've looked at other towns as well. Some of them are, let's say, very high with what they charge for permits that we, issue. I think some towns charge an extra $4,000 for notice of intents and things of that nature, which I think is excessive. But, I don't think that's needed. I think maybe like $200 is okay if you're filing a notice of intent versus, and that's just like, and then $100 for residential, $200 for commercial. Nothing, crazy, but yeah, I saw some other towns that were charging about $4,000 for notice of intent projects, subdivision projects, and the like. So I thought that was a little excessive. So we're not going to go to that level, but I'd like to keep it, just a little bit more than kind of what we have with the big zero for local fees. So that's something for me to work on for the future. Also, if we're going to do a bylaw, we can put the fee structure into the bylaw at some point too. Just to kind of give everybody an update for the Rose Farm status. Now, obviously, I just want to make this known that Joe Carvalho is now currently a member of the Conservation Commission, so he will not be able to comment on anything during the public forum that relates to Rose Farm, and I just wanted to make that known because he would be the person that's involved with Second Nature Farm as we pursue this. We're currently compiling an RFQ to present to the town for the purposes of this project, to basically go through the procurement process and procedures to engage in having that piece of property, Rose Farm, being leased out for farming purposes. So I just wanted to keep everybody in the loop as to kind of where we're at with the status of that. Once we get that all set up, And once we sent the RFQ out, then for instance, we can kind of get a sense from the engagement from the public and also, I mean, the engagement from potential farmers within the local vicinity who are interested in pursuing this. We'll probably get a 1 month deadline or less. I'd like to do 2 weeks if we can. I just have to double check to see kind of what the request is. I think there's a timeline that we have to put this RFQ out for. I just need to figure out what that is. But then, for instance, once we have that, then we can basically engage to see who potentially would like to lease the land for those purposes, and then set up a lease agreement for those potential enterprises or enterprise, and then move on from that with finalizing a lease agreement and getting that on the books for this year. So that's all.
John, can I ask, what, I mean, if it's disclosed that Joe is a member of the commission and also has a certain role in the Rose Farm use, why can't he participate in the conversation? What is the thought as to how it would be corrupted? I don't quite get that.
I basically, because nothing's set in stone as of right now, I don't want the general public thinking that Joe is joining the board for the sole purpose of pursuing this endeavor that he's looking to pursue. I think Joe is actually really interested in being a part of the community and the Conservation Commission. So I understand that, I don't want to basically go through the conflict of interest or infringe upon the conflict of interest threshold. So I think it's in the best interest of all parties involved to basically keep things separate.
When is this public, excuse me, when is this public forum then?
What's that?
Well, you mentioned that he would not be able to participate in any public forum about it. I think, there are two sides to this. If his role as to what he wants to do is not discussed publicly, is not discussed openly, then they can say, look, they were hiding this. So I don't quite, my view is, as long as all the cards are on the table, everybody can join the discussion, and with everybody knowing what roles are involved. I mean, we see this with everybody participating in town government. It's just, we're all citizens here, and I think it's, anyway, I think we'd have to get specific. But I've never been a fan of, well, because you are here. I mean, even the idea that there's a project next to me and I can't comment on it, to me is, anyway, I'm kind of getting in the weeds, but.
No, and I understand where you're coming from. I mean, where I'm coming from is that ultimately the cards is that there's going to be a lease agreement that's made up, and it's going to be drafted, and there's going to be a transference of money that goes and happens with that lease agreement. Okay. And Joe's going to be a member of the Conservation Commission, but also the leasee of conservation land. So I want to make it known that, for instance, as it comes to the transfer of funds and the money and financial situation, does not basically interfere. And that's where I think it's important, because before we even get started with discussions of this, I'd like it basically for him to not be a part of the discussions, because the commission is going to basically bring up, well, how much do you think those farmland's worth, when it comes to renting it out to a farmer? And it's going to be up for discussion. And I don't want basically Joe to be the one that basically is dictating or, I guess, advocating of how much the land he thinks is going to be worth, because ultimately he's going to be the one that's basically going to have, that contract in front of him, and he decides if he wants to sign it or not. I guess that's where I'm coming from, is I don't want there to be any sort of conflict of interest when it comes to a financial kind of situation that's going back and forth between leasing a property and not leasing a property. Does that make sense? I don't know if I've really.
Well, yeah,
explained it.
but, all right, he may have to abstain on the boat, but, you know, I'm not an expert on the going rate for agricultural land rental, so.
Neither am I, and that's where.
And Joe might be the best source of valid information, so.
He might be, but I don't think he should comment on that in a public forum as to what the good going rate is, because, you know, that could be considered a conflict. And I'd rather, you know, try to keep both parties away from that line where there could be a COI.
I understand, but somebody's gonna have to come up with a number, and I don't know where you're gonna look for that.
And I will come up with that number. I will find it.
Okay.
And I will make sure that it is based on research and me calling other towns who may have similar interests with lease agreements in other towns. So I know one in Easton that I'm going to reach out to. So I need to basically get that number from them and see if the potential leasee would be willing to arrange something similar to that.
Okay.
So I'm going to basically say that this conversation is good, and Joe can now come to the back to the meeting.
All right.
But we won't blame him if he doesn't. We're essentially done, aren't we? Or
so I wanted to let everybody else know that I don't know if
I think
we've also shut down Edith Reed for the season. So unfortunately, we don't have the funds to keep it open and afloat, and also have the upkeep to rent it out or look to renting it out. We don't have the staff or the personnel to try to rent that property out to make at least break even with the $5,000 it takes to upkeep the property. So we've shut it down for the season. We'll be looking in the future to potentially reopen it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things that need to be done to the property that could require improvements. But it was a financial decision that had to be made because we just don't have the funds, nor do we have the personnel to help us with maintaining the property.
Okay.
So that's all I have this evening. I don't know if anyone else has any other questions.
I understand it's gonna rain again.
Yeah, don't remind me. Unfortunately, I think April showers brings May flowers, right? But I think May showers is in the forecast too.
I think it's gonna bring May frogs.
Yeah, that's one discussion I wasn't able to attend this evening, but I hope there was some discussion about some projects that I missed about vernal pool season. So hopefully that got addressed.
Yes, I think Megan can get you up to speed on that.
Great.
And
Okay. So anyone else? Otherwise, I would recommend a potential adjourn, Dan.
I'll make a movement to adjourn at 9:29.
Second.
all right. Thumbs up. Thank you, guys.
Everyone have a good night.
Have a good night. Stay dry.
Recording stopped.